Hello everybody, how are you? I hope you're also enjoying the day on the RSA with a lot of good talks here, like we do. But before we begin, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Jan Schirmer. As was mentioned, I'm working as Avast Software as a malware analysis team lead. It's currently almost 9 years in the security field, and I'm mostly analyzing the non-P stuff and mobile stuff, etc. And it's my colleague Ondřej.
So, yeah, hi. I'm as well a malware analyst, but I'm also somewhere on the edge of developer. So I'm responsible, for example, for the scanning engine in Avast Mobile Security. And without further ado, let's head into the presentation. So, what we would like to talk about this afternoon is a little bit about what we see in our user base, how the trends are evolving in our Android user base, what kind of data we gather, and what we can deduce from it. So first of all, I would like to tell a little bit about where we get the data from and how we count the data. Then we will look at some threats that we see and the threat categories we monitor. And we will do some regional distribution of the threats and their evolution. Then we will have some summary of what we can learn from it and what we can tell about it. So the data that we used for this analysis is from the period of mostly last year. We've taken sort of a review of the last year and looked at what are the most significant categories of malware and how they kind of evolved. Then we took a view of these threats in the different regions that we monitor, sort of. We try to compare them based on some similarities that we see in the data and categories. The data come from our users, so it's a user base of tens of millions of users worldwide. What we see mostly is that the infection rate is, on average, somewhere between 4 and 5% of the users. When we talk about the data that we are presenting here today, we took, for the measurements, we took the unique detection and user pairs as the metric that we will be monitoring, which means that, for example, if we have a user that repeatedly has an infection, it will be counted only once in the data. However, yeah. So now let's take a look at the threat categories that we monitor. Some of the most important categories. Am I doing it with the mouse? Okay. What? Never mind. So these are the 9 main categories that we will be concentrating on. First of all, it's clickers, which is malware that usually on the user's behalf, somewhere on the background, clicks links and earns the money through the ad campaigns. But it's usually done on the background, so the user doesn't really know about it, and usually it's something that you don't want. Next big category that we want to address is aggressive ads. This is a really popular category that is becoming larger and larger, and these are usually identified by randomly popping up ads and or making the application that you are using almost unusable due to overloading with ads. Next interesting category is lockers. The lockers category is compared to, for example, Windows, it's a smaller category because on Windows the guys have definitely more profit from ransomware and lockers. However, even on Android, we see the trend that that the malware authors actually want to take a bite of the pie as well. So some of the lockers are actually very popular. Spy apps, that's what you would expect. That's any apps that are installed on the phone or on the user's device and try to exfiltrate data from the phone or try to monitor what the user is doing and where he is doing. This is not necessarily malware on its own, but it's usually something you don't really want in your phone unless, well, I mean, it can have legitimate reasons why you have spy app installed on your phone, but mostly it's not wanted anyway. Trojan SMSs are a little bit declining because of security measures taken by Android. However, there are still some specifics, and they are related to any SMS sending capabilities and paid SMSs. Routers is a category that obviously talks about malware that is trying to root your device, usually without the user's consent. Usually without the user's consent. We also have routers that attempt to root the user's device like with him knowing. Those are usually potentially unwanted programs as well, but if it's what the user wants, then it's okay. New emerging threat, or one that we will be concentrating on, is bankers. Although this is a relatively small category compared to the other ones, it is on the rise, and we can see a lot of investment into this category by the malware authors. And it's also some of the most sophisticated threats we see out there. Fake apps, that's obviously something that tries to mimic some popular applications, but instead on the background it does something completely different. And downloaders, that's probably the biggest category. It's not necessarily as malicious by design as the other categories. However, it often serves as like first stage of other malicious activities. So we will concentrate mainly on 4 categories. One of them is lockers. One of them is aggressive ads. My favorite is bankers. And downloaders. The reason is that these threats are either significant in some way, or they are just a large category by themselves. So let's take a look at how we view the data that we have. We divided the data into 3 different subgroups based on we monitor them in different regions, and we divided them into 3 different subgroups based on some similarities that we have seen in the data. So the first subgroup that we have here over now is Australia, Europe, North America, and South America. And we constructed this sort of heat map, let's say, over the past almost 1.5 years. And in the columns, you can see the categories themselves, and in the rows, you will then see the appropriate months. And judging from the data, we can see that there are some shifts in the categories. There are some visible shifts. In this case, we can definitely see that lockers are becoming quite popular. We see that aggressive ads are on the rise. And interestingly enough, the bankers, although as I said before, they are a small category. If we take a look at this example of Australia, for example, in the past year, they tripled in size. So even though it's just 3%, it's actually becoming more and more impactful. Then we see, for example, that routers are on the decline a bit, which is a similar trend actually everywhere. So looking at Europe, we can also see that the lockers are a very significant category, followed by aggressive ads. And as well, I think that it's important to notice here that the bankers have doubled during the last year. In North America, for example, we see that the lockers are probably one of the biggest categories. We can speculate why this is so. However, they make almost half of the detections that we see in North America. So it is definitely a giant category out there. Aggressive ads are also a big category, and bankers, again, we can see the trend that we saw almost no bankers in North America a year ago, but now the category is 5 times the size. We can see that, for example, downloaders are on the decline, and that's a common denominator for all the regions we talked about. In South America, interestingly enough, the lockers here don't seem to be that much of an issue. However, aggressive ads are a really strong category here. So aggressive ads are one of the biggest threats we see and are popular these days. Again, bankers have become 5 times the size than a year ago. And if we were to pick some of the biggest categories that we would like to see the trends in, we can pick, for example, the routers that are a common denominator in all of these regions, and they are declining. This is probably due to Android being more secure with each version and harder to exploit due to different kinds of mitigations and protections. So routers themselves, like a category, are becoming less and less prevalent. However, they sometimes are used as a module, as part of a bigger attack or for ensuring persistence, and are still working on older devices. Aggressive ads, as mentioned, are on the rise, and in Europe specifically, we can see that the bankers are becoming a big threat. Now, if you want to take a look at some, like what a typical representation of each category looks like, then let's take a look at some aggressive ads and some lockers. I'll start with aggressive ads. These, as I said, are very prevalent. Oftentimes we can see root capabilities for ensuring the persistence of the app. The success rate of rooting the device is questionable, but we can see those. They aggressively show pop-ups, and that means not only in the app itself, but sometimes some apps integrate, for example, the system overlay permission, system overlay window permission, which allows them to show ads even outside of the scope of the application. For us, these are very hard to track because we get user reports that say, I have suddenly started receiving ads and I don't know which app is causing it, because suddenly windows start appearing and the user doesn't know which app it is linked to if it's out of context of the application. So it's something similar, like Facebook has the icon that is showing the Messenger pop-up. We've also seen some instances of pre-installed malware by the OEMs. Usually it's some smaller brands, but these are then installed in the system on the OEM level. Popular families in this case are, for example, hidden ads. That's a big family that is prevalent in the last days. IOP or Guerrilla. So indicators of compromise are, as I said, randomly popping up ads all over the place or in the app, rendering the app unusable. And also, usually it is connected to some data leaks because of the way the ad libraries are integrated or used. Sometimes these ad libraries don't use secure connection, and they also harvest a lot of data about the user, about his, let's say, behaviors, and so that they can more properly target the ads. And transfer of this data is not done in a secure manner sometimes. So if we were to look at how we can find out that something is wrong, it's usually based on some permissions. Oftentimes, such an app wants to get the draw over other apps, or otherwise known as system alert permission, which allows it to show the ads whenever possible. Oftentimes, we can find that they load code externally because of different modules that the ad networks want to utilize, and because of extensibility or plugin systems the ad networks use. And they oftentimes require permissions that are linked to user like private data, such as or identifiable data, such as querying device ID or reading all sorts of personal information from the device. This is, for example, how our backend system, which has some machine learning trained model, how it evaluates automatically the apps that come into the system. It's probably not so much visible, right? So I'll skip it. If we talk about lockers, the main reason they are so popular on Android is that they want to get a piece of the trend that's a general boom in ransomware in last years, mainly for PCs, but in Android we see attempts that mimic, for example, the known WannaCry virus. We saw a family that was called WannaLocker that actually displayed almost exactly the same message as the WannaCry virus for Windows, but it showed it on a mobile device. Other popular families in this category are Phobos or PornWalker. We can see, or we can clearly distinguish this category because when it does its job, you can see various kinds of ransomware notices. These can be either that they want to, or all of them have in common that they want the user to pay some ransom, otherwise some action will happen. Either he will lose all his files because they were encrypted before, and or he is charged with an offensive act, and the ransomware says that it will be reported to the authorities unless he pays the ransom. This category is often also generated per user as an evasion technique, so we see lots of different files that are actually the same family of the malware. The most typical channel how to distribute these is masking them as some porn player, or believe it or not, even Flash player. And these are often through fake ads on sites. Indicators of compromise in such case is that the lock screening with ransom note appears, but this is often already the case when the malware did its job. So that's not the stage we want to get into. There are other signs that we can look into even before we get this ransomware notice. Typically, it will require system device admin privileges, not system, device admin privileges, which manifest themselves that you see a whole screen request to grant special permission for this application, which is called the device administrator. But this is very rarely used in legitimate applications. Like, there are, of course, legitimate reasons why to grant an application device admin privileges, but it's not typical in most apps. So it's something to be on the lookout for, because unless you grant the device admin privileges, the ransomware doesn't have much to do. Here you can see an example of ransomware masking as some Google Play services. This is the screen in the middle is the mentioned device admin permission screen. And in the end, the last screen, we can see that this is for an example of the ransom notice. And it can change, for example, to FBI warning or whatever. Looking at these, it's not as easy to simply tell that something is wrong with the app, because they usually mask themselves pretty well. But in this case, we can see, for example, an instance of SimpLocker, which was a popular locker about 2 years ago, I think. And in this case, it masked as a game. But if you took a closer look and checked the package name, you can see that it's not the Grand Theft Auto Vice City game as it's trying to be. Again, we have a little bit of how the machine learning model behind it works. If you could see it, you could probably see that there are distinctive features such as using Schiffer suites and obtaining device admin privileges. But let's skip that. And I will give word to Honza.
Okay, thanks, Ondřej. Actually, I would like to now, let's go with you to 3 more regions we have. Actually, we split these 3 regions into the 2 subgroups. In fact, when we started working on this presentation, we wanted to add 1 more region, which was the China mainland. But unfortunately, there are some specifications where we are not able to collect enough data from China. Although this market is really specific. I think everybody knows it's like more using the payment through SMS, QR codes, etc. But because of the specification, we are unable to do it like a standalone country. So we joined this data to the Asia. So at first, when we look to the Africa and Asia, which we decided to take in 1 group, we can see in this group there are really big data and the numbers of the downloaders actually. That's probably because it's really easy to download a notice to the device of the victim and then use it as a stager to download some other malware or the bankers or aggressive ads mostly, etc. And also in these countries, we can see there is again big drop in the numbers of the routers and the rise of the aggressive ads. Actually, this is mostly because in the Africa and Asia, it's a bit harder to monetize it through the bankers, etc. So the attackers need to use the workarounds how to directly monetize their work. And in that case, using the aggressive ads is a really good way how to earn a lot of money directly. If you look to the Asia, it's pretty similar standards on the numbers. The aggressive ads growing rapidly, fast, but there's one change. That's the number of the Trojan SMSs. It's usually drop a lot in many countries and regions, but in the Asia, it's still holding around like 10%, which is a pretty big number compared to whole numbers in the country. So we decided to look on the course of the aggressive ads, which is growing everywhere actually, around the whole world. The aggressive ads growing because it's a very nice way for the attackers how to monetize it, earn a lot of money in an easy way. It's actually really hard for the victims to distinguish they are infected and which exactly application is doing that mess on their device. Actually, there's a steady drop in the routers numbers, as we mentioned already. And although if you look on the Africa and Asia, there is the huge number of downloaders. In fact, in Africa, it's almost like 60% of all malware is the downloader, and Asia is slightly below 40%, which is still pretty high numbers. And because of it, I would like to show you some case study of the downloaders. So downloaders are definitely really prevalent malware. Actually, it's the biggest category in most regions in the long terms and globally. And it's usually versus a downloader and additional. It's usually download and install additional application in the background, which can usually potentially download and more severe threats. So it's, as I said, it's working as the stager. It can download the lockers, aggressive threat stuff, and many more. That's actually what it usually do. And also the attackers know they can really easily misuse the paper install model. So they just get somehow the downloader to the device, infect the device, and they're just downloading some additional application, install it, and earn the money for this paper install. And actually, it's really popular in the regions with the official downloader markets. Because, for example, in China, the Google Play is not working there. So there are a lot of applications, almost every application, are spread through the alternative markets. And unfortunately, these alternative markets have really low or not even any security, which causes a big issue. Even the users, the security companies, and even like the other banks, because there's a lot of fake applications, etc. And also the downloaders are many times used, for example, for aggressive ads malware, which often contains a dropper model, etc. So how can we indicate there is something going on in the device? Actually, it's mostly the random library install apps on the external storage in the device itself. But in fact, we of you look into your device and checking what application do you have inside. Do you do it, somebody here? Like oftenly, you check what's installed in your device? No? Okay, me neither, usually. So it's really hard to distinguish for the victim that something is going on. And also, all this malicious behavior is often hidden on the background, so it's unlikely to be noticed by the victim. So when we look how we can distinguish this malware, that actually when we look into the application itself, into the code, in the permission, etc., we can find out that something is wrong with this application. We can notice that there's mostly many high priority receivers, and also it's using the permissions to execute external code, and also the permission to read and write the system setting, and permission to read, permission to mount and unmount the system for removable storage, which is really necessary for this type of the malware, as it needs to install and execute the additional stuff to get monetized. As a standalone market and region, we took the Russia because of the specification of this market. In Russia, like each other region, we can see the huge growth of the aggressive ads. That's like everywhere these days. But except the other regions, we can see there's a big number of the bankers in Russia. Actually, one of the fifth malware in Russia is the banker. That's why we decided to take it like a standalone region and then show some information about the bankers. We thought, or from data we have actually thinking about the bankers and why the numbers in Russia is probably because there are although really big banks actually in Russia, like Sberbank, etc., and a lot of people there. So there are some good ways how the attackers can monetize it, or even like practice their malware before they will spread it to the, let's say, the Europe or North America. It can make a bigger impact on the user base. So as I said, we can see the steady growth of the aggressive ads, also the big numbers of the bankers and downloaders in Russia. When we look to the bankers, actually, the bankers are really sophisticated malware. Actually, it's low prevalent right now, but definitely it's on the rise. Along with the lockers and the aggressive ads, this is the fastest growing category in our user base. And it usually tries convincing phishing attacks to lure users into giving up the bank information or their credentials. And all usually ask for additional information, the personal information. It can ask for you for a security social number, etc., to get as much information about the victim as possible to avoid to be detected by the bank and be able to withdraw the money from the bank account of the infected user. And of course, it's really dangerous because it may impact direct cost impact, actually, because you will lose your money directly, and usually it's pretty hard, even if you have some insurance or some cover, to get some money back, because usually what happened to the victim, they grant the permission to the application itself installed on their mobile. So then it's really hard to get at least the part of the money lost in this attack back. And it's usually extremely sophisticated and complex malware because the authors, they are putting a lot of resources into the bunkers. They are really evolving this malware. They are practicing, they are of course trying to avoid to be detected by the antiviruses, etc. And between the most popular families, it belongs like the BankBot, Exobot, Chromebot, also Red Alert 2. So, in the case of compromise, actually it's really hard for the user or for the victim to notice something's really happening on their device. Maybe it can be unusual login screen from the bank application. You can be really lucky to get notice that the banker is trying to overthrow your screen when you try to log in into the bank, etc. If you let me to allow to do the small teaser, actually my colleagues, they will tomorrow have pretty good talk about using the APK Lab.io mobile threat intel platform to fighting banking threats. Actually pretty good demo, how it looks like and how we can distinguish this malware as a banker and how to find out what's going on and how to use our threat intel platform to detect it, etc. So I think it's a good idea to go there, but I promised to my friend to do it. So. Okay, so how we can find out if something's gone? So usually, again, the bankers, they need high priority receivers. Because what they do, usually they try to steal, when you are using the OTP, the SMSs. So they need to get the information from the SMSs before the user can notice that some SMS scam. So they use the high priority receivers. And when the SMS come to the device, they will just read the OTP and remove the SMS from the device so nobody can notice that something is going on. Also, they are using the permission to draw over the other applications, system or etc. And also they need the broadcast receivers to listen for incoming SMSs, etc. And usually when we look into the code, we can many times notice there are the banking app strings, and they're usually trying to target as many biggest bank in the country as possible. So they also contains a lot of information and the login screens of the banks, etc. That's the way how we can distinguish the application as the malicious and block it to prevent our users to get infected by the bankers. So, what information we can get from analyzing the peaks? The threats are divided regionally. They are diverse. And of course, the malware authors, they react on the market specifics. As we can see in Asia, they are still focusing on the Trojan SMSs, but in the countries like Africa, etc., they're focusing more on the aggressive threats, etc. Those guys are spending a lot of money, a lot of time resources to monetize their work. So they really need to focus on some specific markets, and they really react how this market is evolving and what's going on, the economic changes, etc. And the analyzing peaks can help us to follow the stream. You can notice there's something is going on in some countries, in some regions, which can help us to focus more on these trends. So when you look on the threat trends, the biggest threat on the rise are, as we mentioned, aggressive threats, bankers, and lockers, which can help to get really easy money for the authors. And of course, the downloaders, they have like really steady high rates globally. In some markets higher, some lower, but in global and long term, it's really steady malware. And because of the Android, how it's evolving, and they are trying to make it more secure, there is significant drop in the routers in the majority of the regions. So, how we, like, not only like the AV industries, but even the end users, developments, or even the OEMs, how we can reduce the risk. As the end user, you can do some stuff to keep safe from the malware, actually. You can download the application only from the trusted source. It's a good way to use, for example, Google Store, because they really try to keep the application clean, etc. They're spending a lot of money to do it. I know it's a really hard way because everybody's trying to sneak there, but they really do what I think they can. Oh, again, also, you can buy the trustable device from trustable brand because we know about the OEM pre-install malware, spyware, or even the aggressive threats. A really good way what to do to prevent some exploits is always keep security patch up to date. I think it's really important, not on the mobile, but everywhere. And what is actually really good is to read information about the permission. I think myself, I have a big problem because when I notice some application which I want to try to install, and there is like 50 different ask for the permission, that's terrible. At the end, you will notice that you are just swiping again to finish it fast and go ahead. But it's really problematic because they can sneak up something that you really don't want to. You don't want to install the flashlight, which can get the system admin, or to write on our external devices for sure. So that's also, please do not grant not needed or suspicious permission to the application to your install to your device. And to make some promo to us, please use antivirus. Actually, it can really help you because you can notice a lot of stuff by yourself. But for example, some exploits can be really unnoticed to you as a victim. So it's a good idea, actually, I think, to use it. And what app developers can actually do? I think there's a lot of things they can do to keep their customers really safe and globally help to everyone. They should, every time when they are importing some new code or third-party libraries, they should really take care what they are importing, the code. It should be trustable. They really should go through the code, check it is vulnerable to some exploits, etc. And of course, to protect the user's data, it's really important to use the encryption for app communication and always encrypt the user data. Because you don't want to be the company who is in the news that your customer data are leaked. And as I spoke about the permission, actually, I think it's really important to ask only for permission your application really needs, and then provide clear explanation why do you really need these permissions. And actually, I think one of our last point for the app developers, but not least, is really to introduce and enforce the app as guideline. This is a really important thing you can do to help even in the future to everyone on the global market. And at the end, like I say, the OEMs can also really help. They will, for example, if they introduce and enforce the guidelines, not only for the ads, but if they are using some alternative stores or their own stores or markets, they should have really good guidelines and follow up those guidelines and push the developers to follow these guidelines to keep really everyone safe. And I think a really good thing what we can do, like everyone, not only OEMs, but everyone, is to improve the communication with security companies and sharing the data. The threat analyst data can help everyone, not only your customers, but in the future, customers, every company. I'm not saying with specific company, but really with security companies. And of course, we know it's happening sometimes. The OEMs definitely should check for potential malware in base firmware. So, thank you very much for your time, and now there will be some time for questions, and hopefully for answers.
The number right at the start of your presentation where you said 4 to 5% of devices, is that 4 to 5% of devices that have asked antivirus, or is that like an
You mean the infection rate? Or, sorry.
Yeah, the infection rate.
The infection rate. Yeah, actually it's from our whole user base, we have that what we can see in like it's between the countries, the number of the users that
have encountered an infection at
Avast
some point of time.
block, yes. It's from the Avast user base. It's a block threats, number of the block threats, in fact, in our user base. Okay, any more questions, guys? Or no? Thank you very much that you were with us. Thank you for your time.